you already know that I am a professional coach, a former practicing attorney, and the founder of Wayfinders-atl. You know, as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you about today, I was really reflecting on my conversation with Ken earlier this week, and we kept on talking about this big transition that I made in my life from attorney to coach. And it occurred to me that a lot of you guys might not know about that transition and happened and kind of what the precursor was to that. So I thought that I would get on today and tell you a little bit of my story. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And the funny precursor to that is that earlier this year, I was asked to come and tell my story as a speaking engagement. And I said, I have all my speaking topics on my website. I don't speak about my story. I mean, who wants to hear your story anyway? It's so boring. And this woman said, I think it'd be really inspirational to the class of leadership, who are amazing folks, y'all. These are the best leaders in Atlanta. And I said, okay, well, let's think about that. And then you would not believe it, but about 3 days later, I got another email from a woman who's involved at the Association of Corporate Counsel here in Atlanta. And she said, I would like you to come to the Association of Corporate Counsel happy hour and tell your story. And at this point, it felt like a God nudge. And I said to her, can you tell me why you think that these really impressive in-house people in Atlanta would be interested in hearing my story? And she said, so many people feel stuck in their current careers. And I think that the fact that you made this big change in your life would be really inspirational to a lot of our members. And I thought, that's interesting. That's an interesting spin. Okay, well, if you think it would be helpful and inspiring for the women of the Association of Corporate Counsel to hear my story, I will come and tell it. And then I called back the woman from Leadership Buckhead, and I said, I will come to Leadership Buckhead and tell my story. And I'm telling you guys this because I bet that each and every one of you have a really interesting story to tell. And it is not interesting to us, it's our story. But if you told me your story and how you have gotten to where you are in your life, I bet that if I told it back to you, I could tell it and say it was also incredibly inspiring and uplifting. And we all have a unique story to tell. So I'm going to share my story with you today, but I also want you to encourage you to think about your story in the same light. So if you wouldn't mind right now, you would go down to the bottom right-hand corner of your screen and share button, because I would bet that someone in your work needs to hear this message, either my story of change or about hearing that their story is incredibly uplifting and inspirational as well. So just take a minute and hit the share button and maybe even start a watch party. I had a friend do it the other day for the first time, and it was really fun to see who tuned in. So I like to tell my story through the lens of navigating change. And y'all, right now we are in the midst of some pretty epic changes. And because I have did so much change over the past 3 years, I like it has really prepared me to roll with the punches or ride the waves during this current season of change. And while I don't profess to have mastered change, I don't know that any of us ever can, I am really comfortable being uncomfortable during the midst of change, which has served me really well as I've tried to adapt to being my kids' teacher, my person, my IT person, running business, and cooking 3 meals a day. So in the fall of 2016, I thought that I had my life totally together. I had a booming law practice. My kids were doing great. My marriage was awesome. And I was like, I have this all figured out, y'all. And I thought I had it so together that I thought I was ready to take the step of becoming a foster parent, which was something I had had on my heart for a long time. So in early 2017, we embarked on the journey of becoming foster parents. And if any of you guys know anything about that process, it's a really long process. I don't know how any bad people get through it, because they pick apart your finances, they pick apart your marriage, they pick apart every aspect of your life. You have home visits, you have interviews. It's really a very grueling process. In fact, so grueling that our 5-bedroom, I think at the time, 3-bath home at the time was not compliant with foster code standards. And we actually had to do a renovation to come up to meet the standards of the foster care system. And so fast forward to January of 2018, when we got the call from the foster care system, and they said, this would be a perfect first placement for you. These 2.5-year-old twins, and they have been really well loved by grandma, but grandma is taking care of a lot of kids at her house. And she just doesn't have enough hands to deal with all these kids. And so we would take these 2.5-year-old twins. And it was the Friday night before Martin Luther King Day. And we said yes. And we had no idea what was in store. And so from the first moment that we found out, people supported us and wrapped their arms around us. My Bill came over that first night and took me to Target to buy car seats and clothes and sippy cups and all the things you need when you have 2.5-year-olds. And my 5-year-old daughter really wasn't sure how she felt about this. And my 8-year-old son was kind of like, oh, we'll see what happens. So the first night, little people showed up at our door at 9:30 at night with only the clothes on their backs. And y'all, they smelled so bad that it took all energy not to throw up. They smelled like rotting fruit. And it is a smell that I will never be able to adequately describe, but I changed my clothes 3 times that night. We bathed the kids 2 times that night, and I still smelled it. And that was our first indicator of the type of conditions that these kids had come out of. We had not been told the truth about their history. They had experienced some pretty horrific trauma. That first night, what really stuck out to me is that kids have had the most traumatic day of their lives, ripped away from the only home that they've ever known and plopped down with these strangers they've never met before. In the midst of the hardest day of their lives, they were able to experience joy. I remember Buddy, we called them Buddy and Sissy, those aren't their names, but we sat down at our back door and was like tapping glass, and Trot, who was our dog at the time, was running back and forth, and Buddy was just laughing hysterically at the dog, playing with the dog through the glass. And Sissy that night put on a clean nightgown, a clean Elsa gown. This was at the height of the Frozen craze, which I guess we're in, and put on a clean Elsa nightgown and smiled this big radiant smile. And so these kids who had had the hardest days of their lives were still able to experience joy, and that really struck me. But these kids arrived with emotional scars and with developmental delays that I was not prepared for. In that first month that we had them, I cried myself to sleep every single night. I mean, we had some really, really dark days. Buddy was performing. He was really traumatized, and he would try and bang his head until he knocked himself out. And so one day I went to the doctor's office and I sat on the floor with him, trying to keep him from hurting himself, from hitting his head really hard on the floor. I said to the doctor, you have to help me. You have to help me. I am worried that something really bad is going to happen to this child, and I am not leaving your office until you get me some help. Sissy had elective mutism. She had stopped talking because she didn't feel that her voice was important. And so I had to get her communicating. And that was really hard. So these kids, even at the age of 2.5, had developed some mechanisms to keep themselves safe. Buddy would knock him out when things got too hard. So he would just literally disengage And Sissy had been taught that her voice didn't matter, and so she had stopped talking altogether. And so these were the challenges that we were trying to work through. And every day I was worried that I wasn't doing enough, that I wasn't loving them enough, that I wasn't loving my own biological children enough, and that I simply could never be enough. But the only thing that I could do during that time was keep showing up. No matter how broken I felt, I had to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I was completely humbled by the outpouring of support from friends near and far. As someone who had never really needed help before, it was really hard to accept that I needed help just to get the day. We found some true angels here on earth. There was a woman from the Marcus Autism Center who worked in their severe behaviors clinic, and she came over and helped us 3 days a week between the time we picked them up from day and the time they went to bed. She helped us make sure that they stayed safe. I don't know that I would have gotten through that time period if I hadn't had that reason. We also had friends bringing us meals, doing our laundry, helping us with play dates for our own children. We had a true village supporting us, and most foster parents do not get that level of support, y'all. So we were incredibly, incredibly fortunate. And when life brought me to my knees, my village, my girls, gently lifted me to my feet and reflected back to me my high self. It was a kind, beautiful, resilient, powerful woman that I'd never seen in the mirror, and that is that I carry with me to this day. After those really, really dark days, the fog started lifting, and we started having a lot of fun as a family. And we started making plans for the future. We wanted to take these kids to the beach. We wanted to take them to Disney World. There were so many things that we wanted to do as a family while we had the twins with us. And we went to the pool every night. A lot of you guys saw there. And we also had nightly dance parties that sometimes were broadcasted on Marco Polo. And we had 2 magical months, June and July. Twins turned 3. And then in August, the twins were taken from us almost just as suddenly as they had arrived. And I broke into a million pieces. After I stood on the porch and I bravely waved goodbye to them as they pulled away. In fact, we had told our kids, today isn't about you guys. You know, you be really brave for the twins. And so if you want to be here and say goodbye to them, that's great. But we need to send them off happily because they have had enough fear and anxiety in their short little lives. And so we want this to be a really joyous occasion. So we're going to wave and we're going to hoot and holler and blow kisses and make them feel like this is a really special, joyful time. I'm not going to show them how sad or fearful we are about what lies in their future. So we did that. We stood on the porch. We took silly selfies. We blew them kisses. We said goodbye. And Elizabeth turned to me with her sweet little voice and she said, "Mommy, am I allowed to fall apart yet?" And I said, "Yeah, baby, you're allowed to fall apart." And I burst into tears. And my kids did such an amazing job holding themselves together so that these kids could have this bright new beginning with their adoptive family. My kids really showed me what they were made of when they were able to do that, because it was hard for me to do as a woman in her 30s, much less a young child. So when the twins left, completely and totally heartbroken, I broke into a million pieces. And oh, guess what, guys? I still had to go to work every day as a litigator at an AmLaw 100 firm. And I cried so much after the twins left that I used to joke that I had leaky eyes, and people would come in, like hand me a document to sign, and I would sign it, and the tears would just be pouring in my face, and I would just keep on going about my business because that's what we do, right? As powerful, successful women, is we carry on. And so I did that. Something had fundamentally shifted for me. When I was at work, I felt like I couldn't breathe. It felt like I was wearing a dress that was too small, and I had just outgrown it. And I kept on kind of waiting for things to shift back, and they weren't shifting back. And I remember really distinctly, I had a call with opposing counsel in August on this highly contentious case that I had. And he said, we were talking about an agreement we had come to, and I was explaining what the terms of it were. And he was telling me I wasn't right. I was giving him all the support for the fact that we had come to an agreement, because clearly he might be mistaken because we had come to this agreement. When he cut me off, he screamed at me, "Sarah-Nell, if this was so important to you, you would have gotten it in writing." Hangs up on me. And in that moment, in that very moment, I knew that I was no longer going to practice law. I did not know what came next, but I knew that I would no longer report to duty every day as an attorney for the next 20 years. And so I called my husband and I said to my husband, I was like, "I'm done. I'm out. I can't do this anymore." And unfortunately, my husband, I was talking about him, not about my job. And he was like, "Oh, baby, wait, we can work out." And then when I explained that I was talking about my job, he said, "You wouldn't do that. You've got a trial in December." Because I, at this point, was like, "I'm leaving. They can ship me my stuff. I'm not doing this anymore." He was like, "Sarah-Nell, you would never do that to your clients. You have a trial in December. Prepare for your trial. Let's figure out what comes next." And so that's what I did. I continued preparing for my trial while also trying to figure out what came next. And my husband kept on having these deep soul-searching conversations. And finally one day he said, "Sarah-Nell, if money were no object, what would you do?" And I said, "I would be a coach. I think that it really suit me well. I would get to do all the things I love about being a lawyer. I would get to collaborate with brilliant people. I would get to help solve hard problems. And I would get to really dig in on the strategy with people. I think it really, really play to my strengths if I was a coach." And he said, "Well, then do it." And I said, "Babe, I don't think you understand. I don't know coaching's a real job. I think it might be a hobby job or like a retirement or something else, but I don't think it's a job that I can do and provide for our family." And he said, "Sarah-Nell, you have been successful at everything you've ever done. You will be successful at this. I bet on you." And so at that point, I started really researching coaching programs and putting together a plan on what this next chapter might look like. And y'all, I wish that I said that at that point I felt like I had it all figured out, but I felt like a total train wreck. I felt like I had just, as one of my friends so aptly put it, blown up my life 2 years in a row, right? Blew up my life by becoming a foster parent and then blowing up my life again less than a year or almost exactly a year later, leaving my very stable, financially secure job as a litigator at a large firm to become a coach. But that's exactly what I did. And I will say that I am super happy with that decision. As terrifying as it was to step off the cliff, as hard as it was to let go of the stability of a traditional corporate job, I have never regretted starting my own business. And I love what I do every day. I love showing up and serving my clients. I love helping them be successful. And for the first time, probably since I was in college, I feel like doing what I was put on this earth to do. I feel like I'm answering my call. And that's really, really good. So I'm going to review some of my takeaways, which you've seen in Facebook Lives if you've been following along. The first one is that a reflective practice can really act as your eye in the storm, your calm in the chaos. And I did a whole Facebook Live on mindset, and that really goes through all of the reflective practices I rely on, but I highly recommend a reflective practice. And I love this, which I think sums it up perfectly. Human beings, by changing their inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives. And that's what it means. The second thing that I've learned by navigating all this change in my own personal life is that the middle is messy. This is hard to do for people who are used to being in control, but as you're leaving one identity and forming another one, it's really messy. You don't know what you're doing. You don't even know who you are some days, or dress, or how to show up in the world. And that's really, really orienting. And all you can do is continue to put one foot in front of the other and keep showing up. Nothing is wasted. Every single moment has prepared you for what comes next. The next to live in choice. Find your why and make decisions accordingly. Decide constantly rather than habitually. I don't know if you saw today's Facebook post, but my coach, Tony, said, your current habit is designed to get your current results, which means that if you want to live a radically different life, then you need to do radically different things than you've ever done before. And that's really scary. So you need to live in choice, and you need to choose the radically different life that you want. The next one is change happens slowly and all at once. My decision to leave private practice really did happen in an instant. And yet, if I look back and I'm honest with myself, I can see the seeds, the kind of breadcrumb trail leading all the way back to 2016 when I felt that uneasiness and unfulfillment that led me to become a foster parent. Now, don't get me wrong, that had been a lifelong dream, but the fact that I chose to realize it in that moment, I think was really the beginning of that identity change for me. And I am not sure that I would have had the courage to leave my job and to start this new business if I had not had the experience, the really, really hard, life-changing experience of being a foster parent. As Way says, it happens slowly at first and then all at once. The next thing I learned is that action begets action. So when you don't know what to do something. Take one step. Do not stay paralyzed. By taking a step, you will either make a mistake, which you'll learn from, and then you'll course correct, or you'll make the right decision and it'll take you one step closer to where you're going. For most people, fear of change results in analysis paralysis, and they get stuck in the messy middle, sometimes for years. And so if you're going through hell, y'all, keep on going. Don't stop there. That is not a place you want to be. So I love this quote by Ovid. Change is always powerful. Let your hook be always cast in the pool where you least expect it will be a fish. A couple other lessons I've learned that I don't have on this list is to give with an abundant heart. Receiving so much during that time from our network without any expectation of return. People gave to us and didn't even expect a thank you. It really taught me the true value of generosity, which is if you're going to give something generously, then don't expect anything in return, not even a thank you. Because once you have an expectation of something in return, it is no longer a gift, it is a transaction. And at that point in my life, I did not have space for any transactions. So if someone gave to us and they required a thank you, I would in that instance say thank you, send a thank you note, and then I would ask that they not bring us meals more, because I really didn't have the space to do that. I really needed generosity above all else. And now that's how I live my life. When I give something, I make sure that I don't have any expectations of what I need to receive in return. And if I do have expectations of what I need to receive in return, I name those expectations really clearly so that people know what they are. And that way, it can be a true transaction, right? If I expect something in return, I should let the other people know the rules that I'm playing by. The last thing that I'll share with you guys that I have learned, and it is a work in progress for me, is that your yes is meaningless until you say no. Your yes is meaningless until you say no. So you have to say no to stuff. If you always say yes, then yes is the default, and people always expect that, and it really means nothing, right? But your yes is very powerful when you say no. And so you need to draw boundaries, and you need to really think, is this activity, is this thing I'm taking on, is this taking me where I want to go? Is this taking me in the direction of the life I desire, right? And if it's not, then say no. We cannot do all things. We cannot all do all the things all the time. And so pick. For me, I like to give deeply rather than broadly. So I have a few key causes, and I really invest my whole self in those. And I am getting comfortable saying no to everything else. So I hope that this has been helpful for you today. I hope that this helps you navigate this time of change more courageously and gives you some inspiration of what's possible if you feel stuck in the messy middle right now. And I'd love to talk to you more about it. If you're trying to find a way to feel unstuck, you can always reach out to me through my website or by DM. I hope you all have a great evening and are going to have some yummy dinner in just a few. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.